There's a moment you've already lived. It doesn't matter if it was yesterday or 20 years ago. Someone said something that hurt you, and instead of yelling, instead of confronting you, stayed silent. And from that moment, something changed inside of you. The people around you probably thought you moved on, that you forgot, that you forgave, but you know you didn't. You just gave up arguing. And that silence, you chose that specific silence after being wounded, is not weakness. It's not avoidance. It's the most permanent thing your mind has ever produced. And when it happens, it changes you forever. Now, I'm going to show you 5 signs that appear in every man who learned to stay silent after being hurt. The third one is the one your family will never notice, but it's the most dangerous for whoever wounded you. It all starts in the exact moment you're hurt. Your chest tightens, your breath locks up. The heat rises on the back of your neck, but your face doesn't change. I've seen this happen dozens of times. In families, in offices, in old friendships, always the same pattern. The body screams inside, and the face stays exactly the same. There's a specific type of man in whom this pattern consolidates. His nervous system reacts normally when he's hurt. Cortisol rises, heartbeat accelerates, breathing changes. But externally, nothing moves. Same gaze, same posture, same tone of voice. Most people would call this emotional defense, a protection mechanism, cool head, maturity. You've probably heard each of these explanations, but it's none of that. Researcher Naomi Eisenberger from UCLA discovered something disturbing. Social pain activates the same brain regions as physical pain. The anterior cingulate cortex fires the same way. It means the man who stays silent doesn't feel less. He feels the same, just without permission to show it. And when that permission is denied hundreds of times in childhood, the circuit of emotional expression isn't just blocked, it's physically turned off. Jung would call it a hardened persona, the mask the child put on and never managed to take off. Imagine this: a boy who learned, at 7 years old, that crying made his father laugh, that asking for help made his mother sigh. At 30, that same man receives news of a betrayal and doesn't move a muscle, not because it doesn't hurt, because the circuit to show pain was turned off so long ago that he forgot how to turn it back on. You've heard phrases like, "You're so cold," or "You have no feelings," and you know that's a lie. You just learned to separate what you feel from what you show. And that cost you more than anyone in your life will ever imagine. But there's a second sign that appears right after this one. And it's where the person who hurt you starts to lose you without even realizing it. You didn't confront. You didn't accuse. You didn't fight. You did something more devastating. You reduced your presence. I've seen this in hundreds of relationships that looked stable from the outside. Marriages that lasted decades, childhood friendships, business partnerships. On the surface, everything the same. Inside, hollowed out. To the ordinary observer, nothing seems to have changed. The meetings continue, the messages continue, the gestures continue. But the amount of real presence diminishes. Less detail shared, less spontaneity, less time in the eyes. Every interaction becomes a little more formal, a little more procedural. Most people would call this hurt, processing, needing time. But this isn't processing, it's deactivation. Attachment theory, developed by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, identified this pattern as deactivating avoidant attachment. The brain doesn't break the bond all at once. It deactivates gradually, layer by layer, without alarm, without farewell, without warning. When the other side notices, there's nothing left to reactivate. Machiavelli observed the same phenomenon 5 centuries before neuroscience. In Chapter 17 of The Prince, he warned that the man who walks away in silence is more dangerous than the man who confronts. Because the one who confronts still wants something. The one who walks away has already decided you're not worth the argument. Picture this. A woman is betrayed by her husband. She decides not to confront. She stays married. She keeps sitting across the table from him at dinner. She keeps going to bed beside him. But she stops telling him how her day went. She stops asking how he's doing. 4 years later, she leaves, and he swears, baffled, that he never saw it coming. You've done this to someone. Maybe you still are. And that person still thinks everything is fine. They still don't know they've lost you. And by the pattern, maybe they never will. Before the third sign, the one your family will never notice, and the most dangerous of all if anything you've heard so far recognized you, subscribe to the channel. Silent dominion exists to dismantle exactly these mechanisms, the ones no one talks about out loud. And what comes next will redefine everything you've heard up to this point. This is the sign that changed everything inside of you, and no one will ever ask you about it, because it happened inside your head, with no noise, no ceremony, no one present. A few weeks after you were hurt, something died. The person who wounded you died. Not physically, not in real life. They're still alive. They still smile at you. They still call you. They still send messages. But inside of you, they died. And you don't even know exactly when it happened. I've seen this in marriages of 30 years, in childhood friendships, in relationships between fathers and sons. On the outside, normal coexistence, greeting, dinner, family photo. On the inside, the person on the other side of the table hasn't existed for years. They were buried at a funeral only one person attended, you. There's a documented psychological process behind this. James Gross, from Stanford University, called it cognitive reappraisal. But Gross described the mild version. The version that happens inside the man who learned to stay silent after being hurt is far more brutal. The internal figure of that person, who they were to you, the emotional place they occupied, the importance they held, is taken apart, piece by piece, and reconstructed as something smaller, simpler, colder, more disposable. Brain imaging studies show reduced activity in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex when the rewritten person is mentioned. That's the region that normally lights up in meaningful connections. The brain literally stops treating that figure as connection. It treats them as information. It's as if you'd organized a private funeral for that person. You dug the grave. You wrote the epitaph. You closed the coffin. All of it in absolute silence. With no warning, with no ceremony, with no one present. And the worst part, the buried person is still alive. They still come looking for you. They still talk to you. They still send birthday messages. But you're not talking to them anymore. You're talking to a tombstone. Jung had a deeper name for this process: the withdrawal of projection. The psychic energy that was invested in that figure is silently recalled. And once recalled, it's rarely returned. Because when you withdraw the projection, you don't just bury who they were to you. You also bury who you were in their presence. Consider this case. A man worked 20 years with a business partner. There was never a fight. There was never an argument. Just one important decision where the partner played him. No drama, no public confrontation. Something discreet. That night, he went home. He sat on the porch. He didn't drink. He didn't cry. He didn't write anything. But something silent happened. He realized he no longer admired that man. He didn't hate. He didn't have anger. He wasn't even hurt anymore. He just didn't admire him. And he knew, with absolute clarity, he never would again. They stayed partners for 8 more years, having lunch together, negotiating together, shaking hands. The other never knew he had been buried that night, that every interaction of the next 8 years was a conversation between a living man and a tombstone. When they finally dissolved the partnership, The partner was bewildered. He said it felt like losing a brother. The man who stayed silent felt absolutely nothing, because his brother had died 8 years earlier, and he had been the only one at the funeral. You've done this. You have someone buried inside of you right now. That person still comes looking for you, still sends messages, still absolutely certain you're talking to them. But you know, you're talking to a tombstone, and you're the only one who knows. You'll always be the only one who knows. And once that grave is dug, something far more dangerous happens. Something that makes this burial almost irreversible. That's the fourth sign. Now the grave is already sealed, and many years later someone comes back. And who is it? That same person who hurt you. That same person who was dead, buried, in a grave that no longer opened, sealed. But now they're here, in front of you, sorry, truly sorry. They've changed. They've matured. They want to rebuild. They cry in front of you. They apologize. They show you they understand what they did. They offer you everything that was missing. And you discover, with a certain bewilderment, that you can't go back. You'd want to. Something in you still remembers who they were. Something in you still holds the memory of what existed. But the circuit that used to respond to them simply doesn't respond anymore. I've known men whose fathers came back at 60 asking for reconciliation, wives who came back after a decade, partners who came back with new contracts and old apologies, sincere tears, real remorse. And it didn't work. Not because the men didn't want to, because something in them no longer could. Researcher Anne Graybiel from MIT demonstrated something decisive about the formation of emotional circuits. When a psychological response is practiced repeatedly in this case, silence plus distance plus burial, the brain consolidates that pattern as the default circuit. And once consolidated, that circuit becomes permanently available. You can learn to respond differently, but the original circuit never erases. It means even if the relationship is rebuilt on some superficial level, any small trigger, a phrase, a tone, an expression reactivates silent mode, and it usually reactivates. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul takes the color of its repeated thoughts. Whoever repeated silence in the face of pain long enough can no longer undo that silence. He became that silence. It's like trying to reopen the grave you sealed at the funeral. You can dig, but what comes out isn't the person who was there. It's something that has already decomposed in the dark. Something that no longer responds to your calls. You dug, but there's no one left to wake. Someone in your life still thinks they can bring you back. That person doesn't know that you know, that a sealed grave exists with their name on it, and that nothing they do now will ever open it. You reach a point no master ever taught you to reach. It's not anger. It's not hurt. It's not performed coldness. It's real indifference, genuine, and the worst part, you don't even notice when it arrives. One day you simply wake up and discover that it doesn't matter anymore. This is the sign that takes the longest to recognize in someone. From the outside, it doesn't look like anything. I've seen entire families think that finally the man of the house was at peace, finally recovered, finally light, when in reality, it was the opposite. The Stoics had a word for this 2,000 years ago, apatheia. Not apathy in the modern sense. It's freedom from emotional disturbance. A state where no external movement from the other produces any internal reaction. Seneca described it as the most difficult state to achieve and the most permanent. Modern neuroscience confirms it. Richard Davidson, from the University of Wisconsin, studied what happens to the amygdala when an emotional figure gradually loses its effective charge. Result: the amygdala simply stops responding. No more activation. No more fight or flight. The person became background noise. Machiavelli would have recognized this man immediately, not by what he does, but by what he no longer wants. He doesn't want to retake. He doesn't want to prove. He doesn't want revenge. He doesn't want to be seen. That's why he's impossible to manipulate. You have no offer for him. You have no currency. Consider this. A father was abandoned by his son at 15. 20 years later, the son came back, repentant, wanting to rebuild. The father opened the door. They talked. He asked about the grandchildren. They talked about the weather. And when the son left, the father closed the door and went back to watering the plants. He didn't cry. He didn't celebrate. He felt nothing beyond a distant observation. That man seemed fine. You're getting there. Maybe you've already gotten there at some point in your life. And when the final state appears, it doesn't startle you. You're not broken. You're complete. Before the closing, one last truth. These 5 signs are not a scar. They're not a flaw. They're not a problem for therapy. They're what separates men who still expect to be understood from men who stopped expecting. Those who cross these 5 signs don't become lighter, don't become easier, don't become healed. They become harder to manipulate, harder to blackmail, harder to read, not by strength, by exhaustion of trying to be heard. The world keeps waiting for you to shout, to explain, to give a justification for what you feel. You just observe and continue. The man who learned to stay silent after being hurt is not a victim, not cold, not bitter. He is something else. He is no longer the one who wounds, no longer the one who is wounded. He is the one who saw and walked through. Jung would call him whole. Machiavelli would call him untouchable. The Stoics would call him free. And whoever still looks for him may never accept they lost to his own silence. If you recognized yourself in any of these 5 signs, you are not alone. You are just more aware than you were before the video started. Tell me in the comments which of the 5 signs hit you the hardest. The first, feeling everything without showing, the silent distance, the funeral, the sealed grave, or the final silence. I read all of them. And if you know someone who entered this silence, someone who looks the same on the outside, but you feel something changed on the inside, this video might be exactly what they need today. Send it to them. Subscribe to the channel. The next video in this series is about what separates men who went silent because they were hurt from men who went silent because they were never heard. See you there.